Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muschett, also a CIPA student, and today I want to present you how I analyze the possibility of using systems thinking to find a solution to poverty in Panama. As a CIPA student, I'm here, and the main reason I'm here is precisely because the concerns I have about poverty and human needs around the world, not just in my country. And I thought it would be a nice challenge to see and try to apply this new form, new for me, of understanding problems and reality to see if I could come with a different approach of the different ones that I've been using to address this problem. So first, a quick overview about poverty in Panama. In Panama, poverty is almost the same everywhere, but we have particular problems such as effort duplicity. We don't have a clear policy articulation. The different actors from the government are acting in different directions at the same time. We don't have a clear objective. We follow many of the international conventions and the Millennium Development Goals and this kind of stuff, but we don't have a clear objective as a country and as a nation to address this problem. And the main responsibility relies on the government, even though we have a very strong private sector and a civil society that is pretty active. We have some troubles with the targeting tools. We don't know very clear who are the poor. We don't have continuity between the plans and the policies and the programs we're trying to implement. And we don't know what are the real needs of the poor. So why systems thinking to address a problem like this that seems to be very ambitious? If we understand that system thinking understand all the problems are the result of the mismatch between reality and the way we think reality works. And system thinking tries to attempt to resolve this mismatch. And we take into account that poverty is a wicked problem, and we definitely are not solving it. So my idea was to see what happens if we change the way we think about poverty using the tools that system thinking provides us. So the first step for this, in my case, was just think. Think freely, think without fear, without any restrictions, without any particular framework. And this is what I came up with. Quite complicated, more than complex, but there are all the ideas, knowledge, and perceptions I had regarding poverty. So this was a good beginning. But then we need to think systemically, following simple rules: distinctions, perspectives, systems, and relationships. So the first rule I followed was the perspective rule. To address a problem such as poverty, I needed to decide which was the perspective I was going to use to understand it and to start addressing it. So as a public policy student, the public policy, I think, was an important perspective because was the way a country can address a problem. Then I decided to go through the capabilities approach. The capabilities approach considers poverty as multidimensional, and I strongly agree with that. Poverty is not just the lack of income or the lack of material resources, and is a more human approach. And systems thinking, using all these rules to address the problem. So this was the perspective, the three perspectives under which I start realizing the problem. Then, distinctions rule. Trying to understand what's poverty, what's not poverty, in general, within my country, and the way we are understanding poverty and the different perspectives in play. So the way to make the distinctions regarding poverty was also under these three perspectives that I have already chosen as a first step. Then I realized that we need to evaluate and to understand what are the mental models under which we are understanding what's poverty. And that probably we need a change on those mental models or even an agreement on those mental models to start thinking about solutions and get closer to reality. So another perspective came in and was trying to define poverty and reframe poverty from the perspective of the updated diagnostics data that may help us define what poverty means, and to distinguish poverty from the needs of the poor. It's not the same. And following these three perspectives that are guiding me through this process. So after thinking and trying to implement these rules, I came with this idea of reframing poverty and distinguishing poverty from the solutions, and try to find a way to structure a new mental model where the solutions can give a feedback on the way we understand poverty, and the way we understand poverty help us to develop the solutions we want to implement, like a sustainable system that is going to be dynamic, that is going to be adaptive, that is not going to be just a stay definition, but something that will keep moving depending on how the solutions are working and how those solutions impact the way we are understanding poverty. So then the relationship rules. We had different concepts, different ideas as part of the map, and we start building the relationships between the different concepts. For instance, we are using the diagnostics and the data to define poverty. And we are using our definition of poverty to identify the need of the poor. And if we are using the human capabilities approach, we understand development and we address poverty with the idea of expand human capabilities. And we expect these human capabilities to cause some effects on poverty. And then we introduce into all this framework the fact that we have a pretty strong private sector in Panama. So if the government is not solving the problem, probably because they don't know what the problem is, but they usually don't have the resources, the speed to address something as sensitive as this, why don't we rely on our public and on our private sector? So the relationship between the public and the private would be a partnership to solve poverty. Then the systems rule, to understand all these different pieces from the perspective of system, to divide this into whole and part systems. So you remember the first map I showed to you? It was wide, big, extensive. Well, it was like playing with that, like moving all the boxes and trying to put it inside the places and try to create and systemize my thinking behind poverty. So in the case of the public-private partnership, we have as the main parts of this system, the public sector and the private sector and the partnership itself. So if we go and we zoom that partnership, we continue developing another system inside that. So we have the social cabinet, that is entity already existent but not functional within the government. And this is a large group of civil society participation. So I think these two bodies could be the right figures to start coordinating with the state and the private sector the different solutions. The same with the human capabilities approach. We have the capabilities approach, and we have two main areas where we want to start building the solutions to poverty, that is human capital and social capital. So thinking systemically, following simple rules consciously, because we follow these rules without knowing that, helped me to pass from a very complicated map to a complex and adaptive map. And this was possible believing and not being afraid of being simple in the approach we're using to this. So this is the final map I came with, and all this has different systems that can be seen as part of the same whole or can be analyzed separately. And at the end, it was possible to come with a novel solution to fit our new mental model through a continuous learning that we can appreciate it here, that make it a complex adaptive system to address a very important and weak problem. So by challenging my conclusion, my main conclusion after doing all this exercise and after all this process is that by changing the way I look at poverty in Panama, the poverty itself changed. I didn't expect that when I began. and that simple rules can guide us to pursue big changes. So think and think systemically definitely works. And for me, probably the greatest learning is that we usually, when we address a complicated or a complex problem, we think our perspective and our approach must be complicated and difficult and with a lot of information on it. But I definitely agree that simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication, and that's my experience with systems thinking.